Jason, if you had to give a single reason as to why you buy Apple products, services, etc., what would it be? Now, don't answer that yet. Just
I can
think
think of
about it for a
10.
minute. And yeah. And all of you out there think about that too, because this is the Gadgets for Families tech show, where two geeky / grumpy grandpas get together to talk tech. And today we're going to give you our answer to the question about why Apple. Right? Why do we buy Apple? Why do we stick with Apple? I'm Papa Greg. That's what the cool kids call me, or Grumpy Greg, which most others probably say, since it's on my shirt today. Grumpy old man, but here I am rocking it shirt. So I'm the Grumpy Grandpa Greg.
And I'm your other grandpa, Jay Benjamin. My grandkids don't have a name for me yet. They just kind of gawk at me, and my grandson, he'll tap on my leg and usually point at the things that he wants or on his iPad or something like that. But my wife does have a name for me, and she calls me Grumpy Grandpa to them. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be my name eventually when they start calling me Grandpa.
Hey, embrace it. Go with it. I'll have to get you a copy of this shirt. Just go with it. Go with who you are, right?
Right. It's who I was meant to be.
That's right. Grandkids bring out the absolute core of who you're supposed to be. There we go.
Right.
Now, here's the thing about today's topic. When you think about mobile technology, specifically mobile phones, you really choose between Apple iOS and Android. And Android's got a whole bunch of manufacturers. And there used to be some other choices, Windows Mobile, Palm, BlackBerry, of course, which kind of started it all. So, but they're gone for the most part today. I mean, they exist like there's a spin-off of BlackBerry, but it has nothing to do with mobile phones.
Right.
It's in a whole bunch of other stuff. So when you think about this decision between Apple and Android, that decision drives your phone, maybe your tablet that you choose to get, other accessories, and potentially
home entertainment.
Yeah, entertainment, all that kind of stuff, and potentially which computing platform, meaning Mac OS or Windows, that you eventually choose. So the more these mobile phones become the center of our lives, the more we want everything to play nice with that mobile phone. And while you can play nice between Apple and Windows, it's just not the same. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to dive in today. And there really are pros and cons for either Android or iOS. And we'll talk about those. We're going to talk about why we stick with Apple. And as we go through this, you're going to find some tips and tricks embedded in the discussion. And I can almost guarantee there will be some Apple features or services that you aren't taking advantage of today that could help you get more out of life. So, Jason, how does that sound for a main topic for today?
It sounds good. I think when we go way back to our first, second, or third episode, those launch episodes, we talked about how people just say, I'm okay. It's just a phone. It makes phone calls. I'm okay with it. But it's capable of so much more and helping you be able to, coordinate with people and manage your family and manage your time. You know what I mean? Time management and things like that. Yeah, there's so many features that you could be using now that you don't realize that you should be using. And that was the whole point of the show from the start. So it sounds like a good conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
So that'll be our main topic today. And then in the second video, or the post-show video, and in the podcast feed, the post-show there, we're going to talk about journaling in day one. I've been hinting at this. I've been kind of saying, hey, we need to talk about this. So we're going to dive into that today because I have paid for the subscription. I'm like 10, 11 weeks in on using this thing, and I think it's fantastic. So we're going to talk about that in the post-show. Now, before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's just down below the video. All the YouTubers point down however they're pointing, right? Whatever. Remember, we're grandpas. We're not the cool kids. And but that'll really help get the word out about the show. Hit the like button. Drop us comments. We look at every single comment that comes in. We respond. You can put suggestions for topics down in there as well. You can do that in this video, any of our videos, or on the website. And there's links in the description to do all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Last week we had a little different episode. I got really good feedback in person from folks that listened to it. They enjoyed the topic. It was on digital nomadism. It was less techy and a little more philosophical. And then I dropped the audio into my Leaders Lift podcast feed. That one's on hiatus, so I just kind of cut out the tech parts and put the audio in that feed and got really good feedback from folks there too. So we do listen to your feedback. Please continue to share it. We'll shape the show and the topics around what you want to see, what you like. So, just use YouTube if you need to. Just go down and drop a comment for us.
Right, right. And like I said, you jump in that comment section, we'll respond, and we love to hear it. We want you guys to join that conversation. So thanks for everyone that gave feedback, and we look forward to hearing more.
So we're going to dive right in. We've been doing this show a little bit different now. We kind of put some of the follow-up and stuff towards the end. So let's just dive right in with why we buy Apple. And Jason and I have a few things, integrations, the ecosystem, and a feature called continuity that we have in common for why we buy and stick with Apple. So we're going to hold that one. We're going to talk about some of the smaller topics first. So Jason, why don't you give us your first one?
Yeah, so I saw this, and like you said, we'll get into continuity and integration and stuff later. But I would say the number one reason why I buy is because of iPad OS and iOS, right? These operating systems have came a long way from not being able to copy and paste. Remember? Remember those days? Remember not being able to take pictures or
no
not
app store.
Pictures.
No app store.
Yeah, no app store.
No copy and paste.
No copy and paste. It was only pictures for a while, right until the 3GS, I believe. It was only pictures, no videos, right? And they came a long way from basically just a phone operating system, right? You had a fancy camera, you had a fancy calendar, fancy looking calendar. Remember, it looked like, what was this, the skeuomorphism? It looked like an actual calendar and planner that you had on your desk, and the contact looked like a little contact folder and stuff like that. So now with the App Store and just the ton of features that they added, it is really a complete operating system, right? It is a mobile operating system on your phone, on your iPad, but it is every bit as powerful as a desktop in certain aspects. You know what I mean? And it just came a long way from those early beginnings. Remember when, before it was even iOS, it was called iPhone firmware or something like that.
Yeah, something.
And remember, everyone who owned an iPod Touch used to have to pay for the updates. A lot of people probably don't remember that. That was a strange little period in history over a couple of years where you had to actually pay for your updates. And it was really, really weird, really awkward situation. But they kind of unified all of that. And they said, hey, let's just put iOS on both of these devices and just give the updates that are appropriate for the phone and the iPod Touch at the time. So, yeah, it's came a long way from those humble beginnings to what we have now. So iOS and iPad OS are some of the main reasons why I stick with Apple or I buy Apple.
Let me riff off that one a little bit, because my first one kind of that we don't have in common is simplicity. And this is a tale of two iOSs, and I don't know when you want to put the division there, but at one point iOS was super simple. Right. I mean, you could find everything you needed to. Most of the new features that they add were intuitive. And so that's one of the reasons that I like it. It's mostly simple, right? If you just want to use the built-in stuff, you just want to use the basic features, and Apple does a reasonably good job of setting default settings for the masses, right? Yeah. So if that's what you want, this definitely has a leg up over Android, where you're going to need to kind of customize it from the beginning, even if you want to keep it super simple. So it's mostly simple, and that is great for most of my clients, right? Not my consulting clients, but everybody that relies on me to keep their devices up and running and where they need to be. The fact that the vast majority of things are super simple is great. Not as great for me, right? Because I like to push the boundaries a little bit and see what I can do with things. But it's absolutely great for them. But as they continue to make the operating system more and more complicated, this one goes away a little bit, right? It's less and less simple. One of the things I would really, really like is to not have the same icon grid on our home screen that we've had since day one, right? And be able to do some different things. And now we can do widgets and a few things like that. But most of the people that have phones around me don't use the widgets. They don't use any of that kind of stuff. They are just super happy with that same grid. They know exactly what it looks like. They
Right.
know exactly where. I got my wife to use folders. That was a step, but most others just don't. So simple for most people to use. I can customize it a bit that I want to.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons for me. But unfortunately, as the operating systems get better, they also get more complicated.
Right. Right. And we mentioned this before that this is the problem when, and we'll talk about how these systems kind of overlap now, but when you force people so long to do without a certain thing, a certain feature, widgets or things like that, and you give them years and years and years of muscle memory from placing apps on certain screens, and then you upgrade your phone, and the restore process is so simple that you grab the phone after the restore and it looks exactly like your previous phone. Everything is where it should be. When you add new features in, people are so used to doing without it. You know what I mean? They never get around to using those features. So it's kind of a downside too from not giving us widgets years ago, right?
Yeah.
People gotten so used to just using that app grid, and then folders have been around for a while. I'm surprised she's just getting around to using folders, but I can see a lot of people not taking advantage of it because we didn't have that from the beginning.
And discoverability is a problem, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
the more you add in, the harder it is to discover things. And every time they do a new OS release, they try and put a welcome screen and walk you through some of the big
Yeah.
things. But if you watch any of Brandon Butch's videos, right, I mean, he can sit for hours on a new full release
Right.
talking about every little minor thing that's changed. And iOS 17.4 is supposed to come out. The Golden Master, I think they're saying, will drop today, which means
Okay.
next week we'll probably have the full release. And it's got a whole bunch of stuff around the European regulations that Apple has to deal with.
Yeah.
But it's also got brand new security features. It's supposed to be one of the largest point releases that Apple's ever done. And if you don't follow stuff like you and I do, if you aren't subscribed to our show or to the Mac Rumors or 9 to 5 Mac or whatever the case, or Brandon Butch or stuff like that, you're just not going to know, hey, what's new in this? Yeah, I'm going to do it because Apple says I need to because there's security updates, but I'm not going to pay attention to what features are there. So that is a challenge. And hopefully folks follow the show, right? So that we can help them out. What's your next one?
So my next one is safety and security, right? Now, there's always going to be exploits and workarounds, and Apple's really good about every few weeks giving those security patches and stuff. Remember, they kind of split it away from forcing people to wait for a major update, right? So 2 weeks after an update, you can get a security patch that'll kind of patch some vulnerabilities or things like that. So there's always going to be something like that going. It's always going to be a cat and mouse game constantly, which is a good thing. I'm not going to get into the reason why that's a good thing, but for companies to always have people trying to hack and trying to exploit their OSs, it's a good thing for the future. But with that being said, I don't live in constant, fear that my information is always at risk, right? Now, you and I, we're kind of paranoid when it comes to personal info, right? So we're a little bit more protective than most people, but I think about folks like my wife and my kids and things. They're not walking around under a constant threat that someone's trying to access their information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I run some systems in my home that I am always constantly worried about, right? My NAS and the operating system on there. A couple of Windows computers which rarely get turned on, but I'm constantly worried about if there's some kind of new threat or whatever to try to pull that information. So just not having to worry about that with iOS and iPadOS, and to a certain extent Mac OS too, that man, it just gives me a peace of mind. Now again, they're not foolproof, they're not 100% safe, but you're just not being under constant threat all the time. You still have to protect yourself, but just not as much.
Don't click on the text link that I got this morning at 6:45 from some random iCloud message place that said my package had arrived at the warehouse and I needed to click on a link to confirm the address.
Right.
That's not how the government works, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, you can still get that kind of stuff. And so for me, macOS is probably my least secure it's still secure,
Yes.
right? But it's less secure than the iPad and the iPhone for sure. Or at
Hmm.
least there are more things that could target it. And I do worry a little bit more about that. One of the reasons why I wish I could just work 100% off of an iPad because I'd feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
But my bigger thing is my grandma has a Mac, she has an iPhone.
Hmm.
And I worry a lot less about her getting her bank account information taken or
Right.
something like that. I mean, last time I had to do maintenance on her computer, she had a whole bunch of garbage in her history and her web browser was running low, not because it had malware or adware or anything like that, but just because of all of the places that she had been. And,
Yeah.
she spends a lot of time online and stuff like that. And so you clean that stuff out, it's not harmful, and it goes away and you're good to go.
Yeah.
It's just not that way
She hadn't
with,
forever compromised her computer
yeah,
with stuff that constantly reinstalls and recreates itself like
yeah,
it does in Windows systems. Yeah.
yeah. You're less likely to accidentally go to a website and get some malware if you're using a Mac
Yeah.
because there's so many things, there's so many layers that program has to go through to actually install on your machine. So,
Right.
especially the way we can set these up for customers. So, yeah, definitely
Right. And
security.
remember,
I'm
by
with you on that.
default, too, like we talked about those default settings, like right out of the box, I believe it only allows apps from the App Store, right? You have to
From the
go
App
in.
Store, or if you go to download something, it's going to make sure that it is signed by
Right.
Apple. I can't remember
Right.
what they call it. There's a name for
Yeah.
what they
Just an
call it.
authorized app.
Notarized.
Yeah.
Notarized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but that's what we're talking about. Just that simplicity to just, you know, that there's nothing she can click on that's going to install something that she doesn't want to install. You know what I mean?
Yep.
By accident or in the background or without her knowing. So, yeah.
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 Still
Safety and
have to
security is
educate.
big.
Don't click on emails. Don't click on this other stuff. Don't open, Facebook stuff. Like my mom's passed away, 8-9 months ago or whatever, and somebody was sending out invites from a new account that said it was her, right? And
Right.
stuff like that doesn't matter what platform you're on. But as far as getting stuff by accident, so much less risk here. All right, Jason, you've got one more on your list, and then we're going to dive into the big one. So what's the last one on your list?
Right. So I mentioned on several different occasions my love of these devices, right? The way they're constructed. All right. And it's the main reason why I go caseless on my phone. I just love the design, that Apple design that they put into their products. Now, not all of them make the list, right? Not all of them are perfect. I think we've said several times whenever an app or something is released, or even in the betas, that something is just not Apple, right? The product is just not Apple enough, or it's not. It just doesn't seem like something Apple would do. Usually, it gets updated and refined and kind of streamlined during the beta process or whatever. So when the software is finally released to the general public, it's Apple-esque. But as far as hardware goes, I can remember the devices that made me fall in love with the hardware, right? Of course, the original iPhone, which is this iPhone right here. Nothing like it. We had seen anything like it. All the phones looked a certain way. They had a flip screen or they had a keyboard on the front, and then Apple released this, and it kind of changed the whole industry. The same thing with the iPad, right? But I can remember the devices that picking them up, I was like, wow. And that was the iPhone 4 and the 4S with that glass back. That was the whole iPhone Gate situation where they had
Yeah.
the
You're holding it wrong.
yeah. They had the whole situation with the employee leaking it or leaving it in the
Yeah.
bar.
Oh, yeah.
And they had the security,
Gizmodo.
Apple's
Yeah.
Apple's security go to this guy's house, and it was a big thing. It was almost like, I'm pretty sure we'll see a movie about it here in a couple of years. But man, the 4 and the 4S were some beautifully made devices, right? The original iPad, we had nothing like that before, right? We heard about tablets, and we had smaller laptops with, well, I wouldn't even call them laptops. They were desktops, but they were just all-in-one desktops where they had all of the brains and the processing power behind the monitor, and it was just a thick monitor. But it looked like Apple went right into Picard's Reddit room and pulled that pad that he would do his
Yeah.
briefings in and gave it to us. So the iPad, that original iPad, and then it followed up with the iPad 2, and then remember the Retina iPad, gave us that beautiful screen on that same device, and I was just blown away. So, and again, that created my love for Apple devices, right? And since then, the way that new Apple TV looks, you know what I mean? That perfect little hockey puck looking, well, square hockey puck, and just so many devices that I can name. But there are some misses for me, right? Those AirPod Maxes that you're wearing, that was a miss for me. The HomePod, the big one, that was a miss for me. So I don't love everything that Apple does, but at least the products that I do love and I use, I love the design. You know, I love the effort that they put into manufacturing these devices.
Yeah.
The materials they use. I don't like the iPhone 15 the way it looks, but I love the thought of using the titanium and things like that in these devices. And you know, not necessarily from a renewable standpoint. You know, we all need to work towards bettering ourselves when it comes to that. But you know, just the aluminum and stuff that they use is the what do they call that? The unibody design when they make these
Yeah.
MacBooks and they use just one pressed piece of aluminum to make these things. That is amazing, and I
Yeah.
love it. You know, and that keeps me coming back for more. Right, I've owned every form factor of the iPad. Maybe not every generation. You know, when they do an update and they keep the same form factor, but whenever they change it, I have to have that newest one, the latest one. So, looking forward to next month.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, more to come on that. There's more rumors coming out. I'm sure that'll be on the list for next week. But
Yep.
so, Jason, just so you know, I do go to church with no case on my iPhone.
Okay. Let's
And
risk of dropping.
no rear screen protector on. I haven't put a new one on yet.
Okay.
So when I
Because of the
go,
MagSafe, right?
yeah. Well, I just haven't put it on.
Okay.
But it's that glass back with the matte texture.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty darn nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I know the design of the HomePods isn't the best. I mean, even the HomePod Minis, fine. The big HomePods, the thing about the big HomePods and these AirPods Max is while the design could be improved,
Mm-hmm.
for what they do, they actually do a really good job. I've got a stereo pair of the big HomePods on our giant 4K TV in the main room,
Right.
and they're just nothing compares to watching TV
Yeah.
on that screen with those stereo speakers put in place. So,
Yeah. So what about you?
Well-
You have one more for us?
no, I don't. We're going to jump right into. Let's jump into the number one. It's my number one reason for doing this, and Jason has some bits and pieces of this together. But number one for me is I'm going to label it this way, and I'll kind of just talk about what this means, and then
Mhm.
Jason, you can jump in yours, and then we'll jump into the one feature we want to talk about here. But the Apple ecosystem is the main reason
Mm-hmm.
that I stay in this. And when I talk about the Apple ecosystem, I'm talking about all of their hardware and all of their software
Right.
combined, right? It's all of those things. And all of it works together in some way, shape, or form and to varying degrees of success, right? I think, we talked about, a few months ago, we talked about some of the issues I was having with my HomePod minis and them getting
Mhm.
locked up and stuff like that. That's gone away. So they've fixed all that stuff in the back end after
Yeah.
they did those OS releases in September. So that's gotten better. But if I think about what I've got MacBooks and phones and tablets and HomePods and Apple TVs, and all of it just works in some way, shape, or form with the other pieces. I've been doing a lot on my Switch lately. I'm in second round of the playoffs in year 2 in NBA 2K24, I'm just saying. But it's weird that when I switch over to that device, it is a physical and a mental shift, right? Because anything else that I'm on, if I'm watching a movie on my iPad or whatever else, there's this mental shift that happens. Like I'm listening to music, but I'm playing on my Switch, and I'm like, oh, the Switch isn't connected to my AirPods, right? So it's
Right.
not going to switch there. Or I get a text message and I can't answer it on my Switch, right? There is this thing. And so this ecosystem about everything working together. And one really good example of this is AirPods, which you and I both love, whether it's the Max or the AirPods or the AirPods Pro. You pair those once to a single device that you have.
Right.
and it's paired to everything, including your MacBook and the Apple TV,
Yes.
right? So it's one single thing. On the flip side, if you remove it from one, it removes it from all of them. So that's just this good example of this ecosystem.
And nothing
And
else
then-
does that. Nothing
No.
else does that like the AirPods. I mean, it is seamless between multiple devices, your phone and your iPad and everything. And you don't have to go to Bluetooth and say connect to this. Now, unless
Right.
there's some connection issues or something like that, which happens from time to time. But for the most part, like they always say, it just works.
And they don't switch automatically, right? I mean, if I get if I'm listening to music on my Mac and I get a phone call on my phone and I want to answer it on the same headphones, it just switches automatically, right? And part of that's because odds are if you own an Android phone, you probably got headphones from a different manufacturer,
Right.
right? Now they're compatible, no problem, probably sound good and probably cheaper than Apple, which we'll talk about. But they're not the same manufacturer. So it's just this concept of everything kind of all working together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the last thing I want to mention about the ecosystem, and then I'll let you dive in on your piece, is I got thinking about this yesterday. I don't have to worry if I lose a device that everything's gone,
Right.
right? Or if, let's say, my MacBook crashed. Yes, I'd have a hard time doing this podcast, but I could still do meetings with my clients. I could still handle my workload. I just wouldn't be doing it on my MacBook, right? And you just can't say that about other platforms unless you're really storing every single thing in the cloud. And that's how Apple gets around this, right? Is everything is cloud sync and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if I have a Windows machine from whatever, I don't even know who makes them anymore. But if I have a Windows machine from a
HP, they're
manufacturer,
still making them. Yeah.
I have a Windows machine from Dell, and then I've got my phone from Samsung. They're not gonna back up and support each other like that.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I got thinking about the other day. Is I thought, it's really not that big of a deal if I drop my iPad in the tub. I've never done that before, have I, Jason?
Yeah. Well, it took a bath a couple of times.
4 or 5 times. But if I do that, I don't have to worry about everything's gone and I'm without computing, right? So that's the Apple ecosystem. It's all of this stuff that works together. It's the services in the background. Yes, you pay for those. It's the syncing stuff. It's the hardware. It's the software. It's the operating systems playing nice together, and all of the other things that they do. That's this ecosystem that I think is the number one reason I stick with Apple.
Yeah, yeah. And so we talked about integration in the ecosystem, just all working together. We mentioned several times, me always ranting about battery life, but how they make the hardware and the software just work so seamlessly together that it improves battery life without waiting on battery manufacturers to improve them. But, just always feeling like the devices are connected somehow, right? Even if it's just simple information. You get a text message, my phone is across the room, but it's coming to my watch. You know what I mean? I forget to turn on focus mode or something on my iPad or you know what I mean, or on the MacBook, and I can just do it from the iPad. I forget the name of the little menu in the top. The
Control Center.
The Control Center. You do it right from Control Center on the device that's in front of you. It's being able to work and get the things done with whatever device you have that's nearest to you. You know what I mean? That's one of the coolest thing. And we talk about being connected, and HomeKit, keeps me connected to my home. I tell you, when I'm away, I feel naked whenever I can't get in contact with the house, whenever I don't know what's going on. And not just the security cameras, but, we have the temperature systems, sensors and stuff in here, the motion sensors and things in the house. And yes, like my NAS and the doorbell, being able to be at a market and using my phone to ring up a customer or something, and someone rings the doorbell and I'm able to communicate with that person, see him and talk to him from my watch. And man, I just can't think of any other ecosystem that will allow you to do so much. I know there's some integration with Amazon's ecosystem and Google Home and Google Nest and things like that that'll allow you to do certain things, but not on the level of integration that Apple has.
Right.
Keeping you connected to your home. keeping you connected to your laptop that's at work, keeping you connected to your iPad and your son's iPad while he's away at school, something like that. It just gives you a sense of connectedness that I love, and that's one of the big things, you know.
HomeKit is a good example of Apple not having to make the hardware,
Right.
but giving other companies the opportunity to hook into their ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's not quite plug and play because Apple doesn't play like that, right?
Yeah.
But once you've designed something made for iPhone, right, or you've designed something that's HomeKit enabled, right, compatible with HomeKit, then the user that buys that security camera or that doorbell, if it's HomeKit enabled, doesn't really have to know a ton about the security camera or the doorbell.
No.
They just need
No.
to know how to run HomeKit and how
Right.
to do stuff on their existing devices, and they go, oh, now I can see my doorbell. So my mom and grandma and uncle had a Ring doorbell. And I have one, and I use it. I don't have it integrated with HomeKit or any of that I don't even know if you can, but it's fine for me. But like my wife got signed out of the account at one point, and she just never bothered to sign back in.
Yeah.
And so I was, closing out my mom's accounts and stuff like that. And then so I saw that one was coming up for renewal, and I called my grandma and said, hey, do you want me to renew this? And she's like, oh, we took that thing down a long time ago. Right?
You got tired of dealing with it?
It just didn't play with her phone nice, right? I mean, if it was a fully integrated, or if we had gotten it fully integrated, maybe it would have been different. But yeah, they take it down. But Apple's HomeKit and Apple's ecosystem, there are things that can plug into that ecosystem. Now, manufacturers and then consumers are going to pay the price
Right.
to be able
They
to
are
do
more
that
expensive.
integration, right? I mean, you buy an MFI labeled, charging cable or connector or adapter or whatever the case may be, it's going to be more expensive than the generic knockoff on
Yep.
Amazon because they're paying the licensing fee to Apple to be able
Yep.
to use their technology. But like you said, for the most part, it used to be more true than it is now. Once you get in, it just works.
Right. Right. And yeah, you don't have to know anything about it, right? You open a HomeKit device, whether it be a doorbell or a light bulb, it has a QR code on it. All you have to do is know how to open your camera and scan that QR code, answer a few questions, and it's on after that. So really simple, really, really easy. So another thing too, we briefly touched on it, and I know I mentioned it earlier, but being able to pick up where you left off, if you lose a device, right? If you decide to upgrade a device, that restore process, not even just the restore, but that onboarding process, right? The initial setup, it's so easy and streamlined now that, man, you basically just take your new phone, set it next to your old phone, and it says, hey, do you want to switch everything over to this new one? All they have to do is be in range of each other.
Yep.
I mean, that is magical,
Yeah,
when
my
it
grandma-
comes to technology.
My grandma used to go like 6 years in between upgrading phones.
Right.
And I'd basically have to go get the phone and say, here, this is what you're using now.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's like, I don't want to use anything different. I don't want anything different. And now she is like 3 years
Yeah.
in between phones. But she realizes that when I give her a new phone, it's just going to be the exact same phone she had before. Everything's
Yeah.
going to work the same, all that kind
Better.
of stuff. Yeah. I mean, now
It's going to work faster. It's going to work.
if I get
you
her
know.
to a 15 or a 16 or something with instead of the mute switch, right, and it's got the action button or something like that, I might have to work through that kind of stuff. But
Right.
as far as her being, as soon as I hand it to her and say it's good to go, there's no learning curve. There's no new nothing that she has to do.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of those things. It just occurred to me. Neither one of us had it on the list, but man, that restoring
Yeah.
and the onboarding, I say onboarding, that's such an enterprise thing to say. That initial setup, right, is so streamlined. It's you take it out of the box, answer a few questions. If you can read it, walk through those steps, you're up and running in minutes. And that's just not
Yep.
the case with a lot of other.
And
lot
for
of
those
other
of us that have a
ecosystems.
whole bunch of folks that depend on us to help them do that, it's no longer a, hey, I'm going to start it now, call me in the morning,
Yep.
and we'll finish it up. It's
Right.
you're good to go now, right?
Yep.
Or you will be in an hour. So, and So that kind of leads into the big thing that we've been wanting to talk about for a few episodes, and this is concept of continuity.
Hmm.
So I'm going to put a link in there. There's a whole thing from Apple. This is direct on Apple's website. But continuity is basically, if I think of it, it's this concept of how all of the devices work together. And
Yep.
things can go from one device to another. Okay, so what I want to do, I'm going to run down through this list that we have, or that we have here in the show notes, and kind of talk about these features that maybe you're using, maybe you're not, and that are all part of continuity. So think about this as my Mac talks to my phone, which talks to my iPad, which talks to my TV, which talks to my HomePods, right? All of this stuff together. So first, you mentioned this, original iPhone did not have copy and paste.
Nope.
It took forever to get copy and paste. But now what we have is I can have my iPad, phone, and my MacBook up, and I can be looking at a web article on my Mac, copy the text from the web article, use Sidecar, or not Sidecar, use Universal Control. I mixed those two up. Use Universal Control, move my mouse over to the iPad, to my Notes app, click and paste. So I copied on my Mac, then I use the mouse on my Mac to navigate over onto my iPad and
Yep.
paste the text in something on my iPad. So that's copy and paste plus universal control. I
Right.
do this every morning in my study right now because I'm using my Mac for notes, and I've got my scripture study and personal study apps up on my little iPad mini on a stand right next to it. And so I'm just moving the mouse over, and it's pretty cool because I've got a little animation where it looks like it's pushing through like a layer of skin or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of has to, you have to kind of force it through, and then it drops over, and you're good to go. So that was one of the first ones. Do you use this copy and paste and universal control, that kind of stuff at all?
Not as much copy and paste, definitely. Not as much on it because I'm really on a Mac anyway, right? I'm mainly iOS, but and iPad OS. But yeah, it's almost one of those things where you think it wouldn't work or it shouldn't work like that, but it does. You know what I mean?
Or
And
it
like
should
you
take
said,
forever, right?
yes,
It should take forever because you would think, okay, it's going clear to Apple's servers in Cupertino, and then it's got to come back down to my device. So, but it's instant, right? It's
Yeah.
Command C, click. Even if you're not using Universal Control, I can Command C on my Mac and hit the paste icon on my phone,
yeah,
and it's there. It's instant.
yeah. It's one of those things where I say it's almost like magic. You know, that it's surprising that it works and works so good. You know, it's
Yeah.
one of those features that really work.
And it used
So
to break, but it doesn't break as much anymore. I don't have problems with it not recognizing that I copied something.
right, right.
So,
So I'm going to take this next one. It's on your list. I'm an AirPlay OG. I've always, from the moment they announced AirPlay, I was on it, right? And I started buying devices and things like the old, the speaker system in the garage is not a garage or outdoor speaker system. It's a sound bar, you know, that you put under the television or whatever. And I had it for years, And when I bought it, made sure that it was compatible with AirPlay. Now, I use a different method to play music and stuff in the garage now, but AirPlay was one of those things. So what it does is it allow you to wirelessly stream. Now, this was before, what is it, the casting thing from
yeah.
Google Chrome. It was
Chromecast.
before, yeah, Chromecast. It was before being able to do videos and stuff like we do now, or screen sharing and things from the phone. But then it was just audio. It would allow you to just play audio from your phone, you know, from your iPod, music list or whatever, on any speaker system connected to your home network, right?
Yep.
It was the coolest thing ever. And it's improved over the years to the point now we have AirPlay 2, which allows you to do video and more advanced audio and stream to multiple channels and things like that, multiple speakers from one device. And man, it's awesome. It's one of those features, like you said, that we don't think enough people use it or even are aware that you're able to do it. But let me say this: if you've purchased a TV, I want to say within the last couple of years, right? Not a used old television, but if you purchase a 21, 22, 23 model television, more than likely it has AirPlay built into it, right?
Yep.
You don't realize that you can do it, but you can actually go to your phone now, choose AirPlay, and your television should show up, and you'll be able to, stream music and even video in some cases directly to that television.
Yep.
So really cool feature. Screen sharing too is another thing, which is kind of built into like the whole AirPlay system, but screen mirroring, right? You can
Yeah.
screen mirror your iPhone screen or your iPad screen to your television and watch those YouTube videos or TikTok videos or whatever it is that you're watching. And that's a really big one, and it's all part of this continuity ecosystem that they have.
Yesterday in church, we had a teacher, and there were 4 presenters, and we had to bring a portable TV into the room, and one was connected using a Lightning to iPhone adapter, and another one was connected using HDMI. And I'm sitting down in the audience with the remote control of the TV, switching between inputs,
Right.
to make sure that the right thing comes up and all that kind of stuff. Contrast that with a few weeks ago when I taught the Sunday school class. I had my MacBook airplaying to the Apple TV that was mounted on the wall, so
Right.
no wires whatsoever, sitting on a desk where I couldn't even see it, and I had my iPad in my hand, remote controlling the slide presentation
Right.
on the MacBook that was displaying on the TV, including embedded video and sound. That was super cool. And we've got another teacher, so it's a Samsung TV, and we've got another teacher that's in the Android ecosystem, and she'll be teaching, and she'll just look at her husband and say, pull up that video, and because Samsung's got a version of this Connect stuff too, and he'll just go in and wirelessly put it in there. So just like with MagSafe, where I want no power cords, I also don't want any media cords unless I really, really need high resolution, low latency. But for any of those kinds of things, it's just not a big deal.
Right. So, and you're right, everyone has their own version, and manufacturers are including all of those versions because, like I mentioned about the televisions, this is without having an Apple TV, but you can screen mirror to, let's say, the LG TV that I have. But you can also do Google's Chromecast or casting or whatever, and the same thing with Samsung devices and stuff too. So, yeah, really cool feature. Take advantage of that if you hadn't. And but first and foremost, your computer, your television has to be connected to your wireless network, right? Otherwise, it's not going to get any kind of
TV
connection.
does, but if you have an Apple TV, it does not.
Right, the Apple TV doesn't because it's
And that's
working
the great
directly
thing
over AirPlay.
in church for us, because I don't want that TV itself connected to the internet,
Right.
and I don't want the Apple TV connected to the internet at church, because if you've got hoodlum kids running around, because most kids are hoodlums at some point, I don't want them going in and pulling up content on there. So these things are not connected to the internet other than when I go in and do updates and stuff like that. So definitely an advantage there.
Yeah.
Now, another one that's sort of related to this that I'm taking advantage of right now, and I'm hearing more and more people take advantage of this, is continuity camera. So the ability to use your iPhone as a camera, as a webcam on your Mac. So right now I've got mine connected just because I was having some problems with it this morning. So I connected it just to speed up the troubleshooting process. But I can do this wirelessly too. Yeah. So if I think about like when I recorded that show last Thanksgiving, when I was down at the campground, I don't have to take a web camera with me. I don't have to use the camera that's right down in front of me that would make it so you're looking up my nose all the time, right? I just have my iPhone 12 Pro. I really would like to use the 15, but I keep it for communication stuff. But it works just fine, and it's consistent, and it's good enough quality. And I know some other podcasters that are starting to get into video more and more, and they're like, I'm just going to get a refurb iPhone, and I'm going to use that as my web camera, because like even this 1080p Logitech that I have, it's just, I mean, you've seen the difference. It's terrible, right? And Apple finally
I
put
wouldn't say terrible, but the iPhone is just so much better.
Yeah, I mean, it'll work for a Zoom call, but for publishing something in 4K to YouTube, no, right? I mean, Apple finally put a 1080p camera, I think, in this MacBook that I have, but it's still not the same. We're going to get 4K quality.
Yeah.
out of this recording, and this is on a 3-year-old, 3+-year-old iPhone. So that's
Yeah.
another feature of Continuity. It's called Continuity Camera.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next one is the being able to unlock your devices with your watch, right? And I say devices, you can't do your iPad. Well, it has Face ID or Touch ID depending on the model you have. Anyway, it doesn't really need it. But let's say your Mac, which a lot of models don't have the Touch ID on it, and none of them have Face ID. So you turn it on and it unlocks with your Apple Watch. You know, you get
Yep.
the little click on your Apple Watch. No other device manufacturer does anything like that I can think of. You know, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure there's some kind of hacky, workarounds that you can use for other devices or Windows devices. But yeah, you open your laptop, it unlocks with your phone. I'm sorry, with your watch, and you're off
Yeah.
to the races. That is a really cool feature.
Yeah, this is how I know when something's gone wrong with Continuity and handoff is when my MacBook doesn't unlock when I touch the touchpad with my watch.
Yeah.
Is it'll just say I need Touch ID. And great, but I know a lot of people use their MacBooks in clamshell mode, so it's closed, so you don't have the Touch ID sensor available to you. So fine, just unlocks with the watch, and it is pretty much instant too. So yeah, I mean, I love that one. Other one here on the list is Sidecar, the ability to use your iPad as a second monitor on your Mac. So if you travel with a 11-inch MacBook Air and you've got an 11-inch iPad, all of a sudden you've got 22 inches of Mac monitor.
Yeah.
Right. So that's called Sidecar. That one's available to us. This other one, Jason, I'm interested because, I mean, you don't use your Mac a lot, but SMS and phone calls across devices. So,
Yes.
My Mac doesn't have a cellular connection. My iPad doesn't have a cellular connection. But you can set it, and I've refined mine a little bit. You can set it so that anytime your phone rings, you get a phone call on all your devices.
Yeah.
And SMS, not iMessage, but SMS, like somebody Android texting me. You
Yes.
can also set it up because those normally would only go straight to your phone, but you can also get them on your Mac or on your iPad as well. I've turned off notifications and I've turned off the phone connection on my Mac. I just don't want to take the phone calls directly from my Mac. I'd rather have my
Right.
phone pick them up and stuff like that. But that's still pretty darn cool, right? If the phone's in the other room and I'm outside on the back in the hammock working on my MacBook and I don't have my phone with me for some reason, I could take the call on my watch, I could take the call on my iPad, I could take the call on my Mac
Right.
if I wanted to. And most importantly, I'm going to get all my messages everywhere, no matter
Right.
where the message comes from.
Even your text messages. And yes,
Correct.
this is something that I use a lot when it was working. So we talked about, it works when it works. If it doesn't work, and it hasn't been working for it's been a few months. So basically what's happening is that it's telling me I can't make a phone call from my iPad, which I try to do all the time, because I need to be logged into the same iCloud account. But it is the same iCloud account. These are both my devices. And try logging back in. Just hadn't got around to contacting Apple support. I'm pretty sure they're going to say, have you logged out and logged back in on all of your devices?
Yeah.
Yes, I tried that. Now I need you to fix it. So I just hadn't got around to having that argument.
Sounds like somebody's going to be starting from scratch on the new iPad in March instead of restoring.
I think so.
Probably a good
I think
idea.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there are-
whatever's going on is some setting that's getting saved
Yeah.
with my my restores and backups.
Well, that also sounds like every once in a while, it seems like my MacBook doesn't realize that it's connected to everything else. And I had to do it this morning even. So I have to turn handoff, which is part of continuity. We'll talk about that next. But I have to turn handoff off, reboot the Mac, turn it back on, and then restart my phone, my iPad, and my watch. And then all of a sudden, everything plays nice together. Like focus modes don't run across. And so that's one way I can tell. Or again, that my watch doesn't unlock the Mac. And so what that's called on the Mac is handoff, and that's this communication thing. So one of the good examples of handoff I like is I could be listening to something on my AirPods on a walk and walk in the door and want to pick up exactly where I left off, whether it's in an album, a playlist, or a podcast.
Yeah.
And I can walk up to my HomePod, tap my iPhone onto the HomePod, and it'll transfer the audio that I'm playing right to the HomePod and just keep going now on my stereo HomePods that are sitting in my
Yeah.
bedroom. Right.
That is really
so I
cool.
don't have to restart the playlist. I don't have to figure out where I was or any of those kinds of things. And it's any audio that's playing on my phone. So that's the handoff. Handoff is also required for things like copy and paste. And then the other day, I thought this was super cool. I took a screenshot on my Mac and drug it into Day One on my iPad while I was watching a video.
Nice.
And dropped the screenshot from the Mac in Day One.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got all kinds of stuff going on. I'm watching a video. I take a screenshot. I move it from one device to the other and drop it into a non-Apple native app. And it all works just like there's. And that wasn't even copy and paste. I mean, literally, I took the screenshot on the Mac, clicked and held, scrolled over to the iPad, went into the app where that was, and dropped it. This was not copy and paste. It was literally drag and drop. I mean, that is handoff at its finest.
Right. And even third-party developers are taking advantage of that power. So I like that.
Yep. AirDrop, Jason, I know you use AirDrop a ton.
I use AirDrop almost daily for content creation with my wife. You know, she runs the social media and stuff for the company, so she's always needing pictures or videos or something from my phone or my iPad or something like that. And when we're out and in public, and I'm pleasantly surprised too the amount of people who take advantage of it. Right, we were on vacation a few weeks ago. We were on a cruise, and I recorded a video for some people we were on an excursion with, and they all were like, pull out their phones, like, "Hey, can you AirDrop me that? Can you AirDrop me that video?" And I'm like, "Good, everyone's using this. This is so cool, so convenient. Instead of having to, get someone's email address and, hey, I'll send it to you whenever I'm in Wi-Fi or something like that. I was able to give them those videos that I took, right then at the moment, and I love it. It's so convenient. It's just a convenient way to share information, whether that be contacts. Also, I get asked every event, anything that we're at, I get asked about our tent. We have a really nice looking tent. It's my board cube that I always talk about. And now we have a mini version of it. So it never fails. Someone comes up and they say, "Hey, where did you get this tent?" And I say, "The guy's name is Shane." Shout out to Shane at Master Tent, by the way. The guy's name is Shane. Let me AirDrop you his contact information.
Yep.
And everyone with an iPhone, they get AirDrop. Everyone with an Android, of course, I have to do some kind of old-fashioned grandpa text message. Yeah. So
with the
AirDrop gets used a lot.
Yeah. Well, all right, so one more on here. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these. And what I would hope is that you went, "Oh, I didn't realize I could do that." On at least one of these. And this last one is Instant Hotspot. And this one can be a little flaky sometimes, but this is the idea that if my phone data plan has hotspot capabilities, that I don't have to do anything to connect my Mac or my iPad to it. I just go into Wi-Fi and choose my iPhone and hit the button, and I'm good to go. No password, none of that kind of stuff. It's just an instant connection there. And I use this quite a bit when we're out camping, right? Because I don't want my Mac or my iPad always connected to my phone, because I don't want it to constantly be drawing down the battery or the data allotment and all that kind of stuff, because it's not unlimited data, even though they say it is. It's really you get so much, and then they take you back to snail speeds. But this is just really cool, right? There's no worrying about passwords. There's no, the network password changed, none of that kind of stuff. It's just boom. Now, you can still connect other non-Apple devices to your hotspot, but you're going to have a password. Right? You have to do the normal Wi-Fi connection thing. But with your Apple devices, it's just instant connection. Have a nice day.
Right. And also sharing those passwords, too, when someone wants to connect to a network that you're connected to. They have an iPhone or whatever, you can hit share password. You don't necessarily have to know or remember the password to give to them. Just share it with them.
Yeah, I think I get that once a week or once a month at church.
Right.
Somebody's forgotten, because there's a public version of the network, and then there's the one we use for all of the
internal
logistical stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right, let's shift gears. Let's wrap this up then, Jason, with what makes it hard to buy Apple. And you and I put the same thing first. So go
Yeah.
ahead. I'll let you have the honor of this one.
So it's almost always the cost, right? And you know me, and some of our listeners, they know me. I'm
Frugal.
frugal, not cheap. I'm frugal, and sometimes it's hard to justify the cost of the device, right? If we can't
Yeah.
get multiple purposes out of it, if I can't hand it down to, or pass it along to someone else when the next version comes out or the next one. Remember, I always use that gold aluminum Apple Watch that I got. No one wanted it. No one wants my Ultra. You're right; it's too big for everyone. So it's hard to justify those huge price tags for some of these devices if I'm going to be the only one using it, or I can't use it for something else after I'm done with it, like the
Yeah.
the iPad that we use as our HomeKit iPad, right? That was an easy purchase because once it's done, it can be
Yeah.
used for something else. So it's almost always the cost. And the next thing with that cost, sometimes it's just not enough value, right? It's not enough. Of course, I want the latest and greatest, but on that release cycle, they just didn't give me the features, or it just wasn't enough in the update to really make me want to pull the trigger. So those two things, just the cost is usually the
Especially
big
when
deal.
it comes to phones and iPads, right? And
Right.
especially the phones, right? Because they are so slow to gain groundbreaking new features now, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of hit peak smartphone. And that's the other thing. I mean, I put here first is if you put aside the costs of flagship mobile phones, right? Because Android's flagship, regardless of the manufacturer, OnePlus, Samsung, doesn't really matter, right? They're going to run on par cost wise with an iPhone. Their
Yeah.
flagships are. But like you said, I want the big phone. Nobody else in my family wants the big phone.
Right.
I wanted the bigger watch. Nobody in my family, as much as my wife has trouble keeping she's got a Series 6 or 7, whichever one it is, right? As much as she has problems keeping that thing charged and remembering to charge it enough so that it doesn't die by the time she gets home from school, she'll never go with the Ultra.
Right.
She's just not going to do it. And so that I call the power user piece, right? Is that if you are a power user, you get an iPad Pro. I want the iPad Pro. We both have the Ultra. We both want the big giant phones, right? And it just hits that point where family goes, yeah, I don't want that, but
Yeah.
I still need a new phone. And so everything's costing more to buy things for the family. And then you don't, as power users, we can't hand down, right? We can't
Right.
hand down our devices. And sometimes the trading values are okay. They're never great. Sometimes the trading
Never
values
great.
are okay,
Yeah.
but you're just not going to do that. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other thing, I have besides that is if you're a power user, it gets really hard. You outgrow Apple's default stuff
Yeah.
very, very quickly. And then you either have to get real geeky and know how to program shortcuts or use AppleScript on the Mac or stuff like that. Or you have to find niche apps, which means now you're paying even more, right, to have all these apps. That's fine in some cases, but in other cases it's not. So those to me are
Yeah.
kind of they're related, right? The cost
Right.
and then being a power user gets more expensive both because you're buying the highest end hardware that maybe nobody else wants, and you're also probably having to invest in other services.
Yeah.
In
That
order
base
to get it
model
to be
is
where you
really for us. It's really
Yeah.
for us. Yeah.
I'm going to struggle with this because I think about having to pay $3,000 or $4,000 for an iPad Pro, and I want to, but then I look at paying half as much for the iPad Air, the 12.9, and I think, is that a better value
Yeah.
for me, right? Because nobody will want the 12.9 Pro. Well, Dustin,
Yeah.
maybe, but he most likely would want the latest gen stuff. So I'm buying it, and either going to have to wear it out, or I'm just going to have to know I'm going to lose half of the value on trade-in.
Yeah.
Or do I go with the Air that is more likely to be handed down to somebody else that may want it? So those conversations are in our heads, right? Are not as easy as they used to be. And then
Yeah.
you got to think about this. Both of us are doing this. I mean, I'm the one buying this stuff for the grandkids. I got 3 grandkids that are coming up now, and
Yep.
it just can be super, super pricey. If I think about all the Apple devices I have in my home
Yeah.
right now, that's a lot.
It is. It is. So you mentioned something though that brought me up to my next point is wearing these devices out. You know, sometimes, and this may not be a good thing for Apple, but some of their devices are made to last, right? We want the latest and greatest. We always want to be on that next device. We want those latest few features that they add when it's, enough to justify the cost. But for the most part, you buy a phone, you can use that phone for a good 5, 6, 7 years and get really good use out of it. The same with iPads. You don't necessarily need the latest iPad. I'm thinking now, even the M1 iPad is still a really good, useful device now, right? It's a device you can hand down. Grandkids can use it. You get a new model comes out in a few more years. You bump that down, and whoever had the oldest device, you can take that, sell it, or trade it, or whatever. So it may not be good for Apple's profits, but the devices they make, they're designed to use for years. You know what I mean? So sometimes the device that I'm on, we always say, and multiple YouTubers and content creators say, if you're on an M1, you don't need to go to an M2, right? If you're on an M2, you don't need to go to the M3. Wait till there's an M4 or M5 and then jump over to that. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, when we're weighing the cost of these devices, sometimes the device you have is enough.
Right. And Apple just announced with 17.4, apparently the iPhone 15 Pros, I don't know which models, right, are going to be, they originally said that they were good for 500 complete charge cycles, that they would retain 80% of their value for at least 500. Now they're saying it's 1,000.
Wow.
So and you're not going to run one cycle a day, because this is going from 0, right?
Yeah.
From 100 to 0 and then back up to 100. So, I mean, I've had this phone, this 15 Pro Max, I've had it since September, right? So you figure October, November, December, January, 5 months. And I'm at 7, right? So you're talking the battery, which is actually the easiest part to replace on a phone, can last for 1,000 charge cycles, probably longer than most people are ever going to keep their phone, right? And so, I mean, this stuff lasts forever. And if it's only an incremental upgrade, it's hard to justify another $1,500, right? So, I mean, I went from the 12 to the 15, 12 Pro to a 15 Pro Max, and that was significant. But you're on a 14 Pro Max, and you didn't even think twice about the 15 Pro Max.
I still love it. It reminds me of that one device that I keep mentioning. It was the iPhone 4 and 4S. It looks like a bigger version of that phone.
Right.
So, I love it. But
what else you got for us?
To finish up with that, with cost, while we're talking about cost, sometimes the device is just not for me. I mentioned earlier the AirPod Maxes. I never had any kind of thought that I wanted those, and was actually surprised when you said you wanted them. And you bought them and you love them. You use them a lot. I was really surprised that you wanted some.
I've been using them more lately. Yeah. It's just every time I put them on and I turn on a lossless song that I really enjoy, it's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. It reminds you of why you love them so much.
You're absolutely right. It's just not.
Yeah.
And, here's the other difference, because I see what else you've got on the list here, right? You've got HomePods, for example, on your list.
Yeah, HomePods was never for me.
You're much more open to mixing and matching ecosystems and figuring out how to make them work, right? And I am just not, right? I just don't want to do that. Now, you and I were talking about this before we hit record today. I might have to get more comfortable with this when we start talking about doing Internet of Things in my RV, right? Because I just there just may not be as many things. So, but that's a bridge that we'll cross to. But I mean, you're using some of the Amazon products for speakers and for other stuff. There are plenty of people that love the Sonos ecosystem, and it's all AirPlay compatible, right? But for me, it was just like, I just am going to buy the Apple stuff because, again, I know exactly how it's going to work, and I just didn't want to fiddle around with it.
Yeah. And just devices not being for me, I think about, too, the devices that I'm never going to buy, well, at least for myself, Like I'm never going back to a regular Apple Watch. I'm always
Yeah.
going to stay on all of the Ultras. And we missed the Ultra too, right? You and I both said it just
Yep.
wasn't enough to get us to jump on it. Never going back to a regular iPad. I'm always going to buy a Pro for myself. And if I
I'm
can't hand that
debating that
down,
one. I
yeah,
got the debate on that one at the moment. But yeah, I'm with you.
yeah, never going back. Same Apple TV.
AirPods versus AirPods Pro, right?
Yeah,
There's just enough in the Pro versions that you're just gonna,
yeah, never going back.
and
Skip this
that
last
means
version.
more money.
Yeah,
It's
and
all
that's what
more
Apple
money.
wants. That's what Apple
Yeah.
wants. So, but yeah, sometimes the devices are just not for me, and just not worth paying that extra, or paying the not the extra, paying the total price for it. So yeah, cost is always the main factor when it comes to not buying these devices.
Any final comments then, Jason? I think we can wrap up at this point.
Yeah. Well, I just have here. No matter what platform you're on, I know FOMO is a thing, right? People feel like, and I think I don't know for certain because I don't have any friends that do this, but I'm pretty sure people go back and forth because they feel like they're not getting everything that they want out of a certain ones. Like they jump back and forth between Android and iOS, but these companies they have somewhat of a universal feature set that they give us, right? They know what customers want. Google knows what their customers want. Apple knows what their customers want. And we all kind of want the same things. So don't think that you're missing out on certain features and things like that. Now, don't get me wrong. Apple does things a bit smoother, a bit more polished in many respects than Android does. But, there's a way to figure out a way to get the job done, to do the things that you want done on any ecosystem. It's just instead of having to hodgepodge and like mix a bunch of apps and services and things to get your job done. Some of these ecosystems like Apple, just it's all built in. You open it out of the box and you don't have to download anything extra, pay anybody else a secondary subscription or something for. It just works. So as long as you're getting and using, then that's what we want here. That's our whole goal of the show. So no matter if you're on Android or iOS, as long as you're getting the most out of it, then I'm happy with it. So as long as you're getting the experience that you want, then we're all for it. So
now here's my final tip. Let's say you're just figuring this out, or you just got married and one's Android and one's Apple, and you want to consolidate, or you're just trying to think about how do I make things easier on my family, or I'm going to be buying my first home, or getting into my first apartment, or whatever the case may be, and you think, this is what I want. I want this ease of use. I want this continuity. Right. I want everything to just work well, but I'm young and can't afford it, or I just can't do that. Start small, but go look for the Apple refurb stuff. Go into Apple's refurb store. Phones, tablets, Macs, find the refurb stuff. Best Buy Open Box, another great place to look for stuff because they have the Geek Squad go through and certify some of that kind of stuff, and you can buy different levels of things like that. So, that's what I would say is if you just want to get into this, then just start there. And probably start with the phone. That's where most people probably need to start, and you can definitely get the refurb phone with that kind of stuff. And that would be my advice to you because, again, cost. We are not discounting the impact of cost. And it was one thing when I worked for the nice big Silicon Valley tech company, I was less concerned. I wouldn't be having the debate about the iPad Air versus the iPad Pro if I was still at that job, right?
Yeah.
It just wouldn't be, there wouldn't have been a debate, but it is right now. And so we recognize the cost is there, but if this is where you want to get to, check out the refurb stuff.
Yeah.
And Apple will take trade-ins even on Android devices, and other places will too, Gazelle and some of those kind of places where you can do trade-ins and stuff like that. And if you have a specific thing you want to ask us about this, again, drop a comment in the video. We'll respond to it, or let us know. So, all right, well, that's all we have for today. Jason, you got a heads up for us for next week's show?
Nope. Still thinking. There's a couple of things I want to cover, but usually you'll send me an article or something, or we'll have a conversation during the week, and I say, you know what, we need to share that with the world, which is how the Nomad thing came into the Tech Nomad became an episode. So Yep, still thinking about it. It'll be a surprise next week, but I guarantee you it'll be good, just like
All
today.
right. Well, stick around if you want to hear a little bit more about the journaling stuff that I've been doing. If you don't like the sound of my voice, post show might not be for you because I'll probably do a lot of talking. Although I know Jason's going to have questions for me.
Yeah.
So don't forget to do all the things. Hit the subscribe and like and comments down below. Right. Actually, there's probably videos to the right, to the left, to subscribe and to relate a video.
Yeah.
Whatever. We're not professionals at this stuff. We do this for us first and foremost, but we want you to get the most out of it. But interact with us in those comments. That would be great. And with that, Jason, you got a closing for us?
Nope, that's it. We'll go back to the original. Cool podcast closing, guys. We'll see you
Cool
next
podcast
week.
closing. Except for this is no longer just a podcast. Now you got to say cool tech show closing.
Cool tech show closing.
All right. Thanks, everyone.